Hello, and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that pull you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable. Let your body become still and allow the noise of the outside world to fade into silence. Tonight, something waits for you in the dark, so close your eyes, listen closely, and let yourself drift into Umbral Dread. Story 1. When I moved into this neighborhood a couple of weeks ago, I genuinely believed I was stepping into something calm, a reset. The streets are lined with tall trees, the houses spaced comfortably apart, and everything looks neat in a quiet, unremarkable way. The neighbors are polite but distant. Quick nods, short waves, nothing more. I actually preferred that. After years of chaotic hospital shifts and rotating schedules, I wanted somewhere that felt steady. I'm a nurse, so my job is anything but predictable. Long hours, emergencies, sudden loss, emotional strain. When I come home, I want boring. I want routine. Wake up, work, shower, sleep, repeat. Boring feels safe to me. For the first few days, that's exactly what I had. Until the knocking started. It was 3 a.m. the first night. Not a soft knock, not a polite tap. It was relentless, fast and insistent, like someone who wouldn't leave no matter how long I waited. I dragged myself out of bed, irritated and groggy, checked the clock, 3 a.m. exactly, and stomped toward the door. I didn't even check through the peephole. I just opened it with a sharp, "What?" and froze. A little girl stood on my porch, blonde hair, big green eyes, clean clothes, not torn or dirty. She didn't look neglected. She looked normal, healthy, cared for. My tone changed immediately. "Hey, are you okay?" She just stared at me. A full minute passed. Silence except for crickets in the distance. I repeated myself. Slowly, she stepped closer. Close enough that I could see her eyelashes trembling slightly. Then she said, very clearly, "You're next," and shoved me. Hard enough that I stumbled back a step. Then she ran into the woods that bordered the neighborhood. I stood there in shock for several seconds before closing the door. I told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe older kids putting her up to it. Maybe she thought it was funny. I barely slept that night. The next night, at exactly 3 a.m., the knocking started again. Same girl, different outfit, same words. "You're next." Same shove, same sprint into the woods. This went on every night, every single night. She always looked clean, different clothes each time. Not a homeless child. Not someone wandering around lost. Someone who went home after this. Someone who had parents. I kept answering because I couldn't ignore it. If I tried to stay in bed, the knocking got louder, faster. It wouldn't stop. It felt like it would go on forever unless I opened the door. And part of me was worried about her. What if someone was forcing her to do this? What if she was being made to threaten me? Last night changed everything. It started the same way. 3 a.m., incessant knocking. I opened the door. And this time, she was holding a knife. I barely had time to register it before she lunged forward and sliced my arm. It wasn't deep, but it was deliberate. Then she ran into the woods again. I locked the door and pressed my back against it, shaking. I cleaned the wound myself. I've seen worse injuries 100 times over at work. But treating your own blood is different. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Now I can't stop thinking. Why escalate? Why start with words, then move to a blade? Who is behind this? Because this cannot be just a little girl acting alone. And the question that keeps circling in my head is, what comes next? If several nights of threats led to a shallow cut, what happens after that? Tonight will be 3 a.m. again. I know it will. The knocking will come. I'm not sure I can handle opening the door again. So here's what you need to do. Not later, not tomorrow, but immediately. First, stop opening the door. Whatever is happening here is no longer a strange prank. It became a crime the moment she threatened you. It became dangerous the moment she escalated to violence. The fact that she sliced you means someone is testing your response. They are studying how you react. You answering the door every time has taught them something. Second, call the police. Not tomorrow. Not after the next knock. Now. You were assaulted with a weapon. That is not ambiguous. That is not paranoia. That is not imagination. File a report. Document the injury. Take photos of your arm. Photograph your porch. Document the time. 3 a.m. exactly every night. Patterns matter. Third, install cameras immediately. Doorbell camera, motion lights, cameras facing the woods. Even a cheap one is better than nothing. If she is real, she will appear on camera. If she is not alone, you might capture someone else nearby. The consistency of the time suggests planning. Fourth, do not engage. If she knocks tonight, do not open the door. Call 911 while the knocking is happening. Tell them a minor who previously assaulted you is back at your door. Let them handle it. Fifth, check your wound carefully. If the knife was used on others, infection is a risk. You know this as a nurse. But also consider this. The slice may have been intentional, beyond intimidation. Someone may be attempting to create fear, but someone may also be attempting something more deliberate. Clean it thoroughly, monitor it. Now let's address something important. The woods. She runs into them every time. That means she knows them. That means she's comfortable in the dark. A child that age does not repeatedly sprint into dense woods at 3 a.m. alone, unless she is extremely familiar with the terrain or someone is waiting for her there. You mentioned the neighbors are introverted and interactions are limited. That also means you don't know who lives around you. You don't know who might have a child matching that description. Start asking questions, discreetly. But here's the part that unsettles me most, the exact timing. 3 in the morning's not random. It's consistent, predictable, ritualistic, and she always looks well-dressed. Different outfits, that means she is going home and being put to bed. This isn't a lost child. This is coordinated. You asked what comes next. If the pattern continues, the next escalation would not be symbolic. It would be invasive, breaking in, dragging you outside. Or worse, luring you out so someone else can step inside. Stop answering the door, call the police, get cameras. And if the knocking continues tonight, record the sound without opening the door. One more thing. You're a nurse. Your schedule is likely known. People notice when someone new moves into a neighborhood. They notice when someone leaves early and comes home late. Someone may have chosen you specifically. You are not overreacting. You are not crazy. You were assaulted. And escalation patterns rarely reverse themselves. Please update after tonight. Story 2. Hey, I need you to pause. I'm not going to argue with what you experienced. I'm not going to dismiss how real it feels. I'm not going to tell you you're crazy. But I am going to tell you something very clear. Do not drive. Not because of the house. Not because of Lucas. Because you're drunk. Because you're emotional. Because your brain is lit up on grief and alcohol and adrenaline. That combination is not trustworthy. You said your engine is already running. Turn it off. Right now. You can sit in the car. You can cry. You can listen to the voicemail again if you need to. But do not put the car in drive. I'm serious. Now let's separate a few things gently. You lost someone without closure. Not death, not breakup, not explanation. That kind of disappearance is psychologically brutal. It creates something called ambiguous loss. Your brain never gets a clean ending, so it keeps searching for one. It replays. It reconstructs. It fills in missing sentences. Your mind is starving for completion. When you're sleep-deprived, stressed, isolated, and grieving, your brain can do very convincing things. It can generate sensory continuity. It can reassemble memories into voice. It can blur boundaries between spaces that held trauma. The house isn't hunting you. Your brain is trying to solve something that never got solved. And when you mix grief with alcohol, your emotional center takes the wheel. You're not stupid. You're not weak. You're not pathetic. You are lonely and hurting, and someone just handed your brain a stimulus that looks like hope. Of course you want to chase it. But listen carefully. If that voicemail was real, Lucas could have called during the day. He could have texted without theatrics. He could have sent a full sentence. Instead, it hit at 3:11 a.m., the same time your anxiety peaks, the same time your body associates with the house, the same time your brain is most vulnerable. That timing matters. I want you to do something very specific. 1. Turn off the engine. 2. Take your keys out of the ignition. 3. Put them in the back seat. 4. Stay parked. You don't need to decide anything tonight. You don't need to solve the sentence. You don't need to finish what he didn't write. You need to get through the next 30 minutes safely. That's it. Let's talk about the sentence. I need you to know that there are thousands of possible endings. You don't actually need the house to supply one. Because here's the truth. If he wanted you to know something, he would have told you when he left. He planned it. His family rehearsed it. They cut you out deliberately. That unfinished sentence doesn't belong to a haunted wall. It belongs to a man who chose silence. And your brain hates unfinished things, so it keeps trying to finish them. Right now, your nervous system is overstimulated and amplified by alcohol. Everything feels meaningful, symbolic, charged. It doesn't mean it isn't painful. It just means your brain is not in decision-making mode. You are not going north tonight. You are not going back to that house tonight. You are going to stay in this parking lot, sober up, maybe cry some more, maybe call Ray, maybe call literally anyone who can physically come and sit with you. You do not need to be alone with this. Let me ask you something important. If you drive north and nothing supernatural happens, if it's just an empty house, what then? You'll be alone in a dark farmhouse, drunk, emotionally wrecked, 2.5 hours from safety. That's the real risk here. Not ghosts, isolation. Your grief is real. Your fear is real. Your longing is real. But the house is not calling you. Your unresolved love is, and you do not have to answer it tonight. Turn off the engine. Text Ray. Even just, can you talk? If you can't do that, stay here and keep typing. I'll stay with you, but don't drive. Story 3. I didn't want to write this so soon. I told myself I needed to calm down first to get at least a few hours of sleep, to let my head clear before I tried to explain any of this. But I haven't slept at all, and the longer I sit here replaying everything in my mind, the worse it feels. Something happened last night, something I can't ignore, and can't easily explain away. I tried to convince myself it was stress, or lack of sleep, or my imagination feeding off fear. But that excuse doesn't fit anymore. After I made my last post, I kept every light in the apartment on. I turned the TV up louder than usual, flipped between channels without watching anything, just to fill the silence. That silence has become the worst part of being here. It's not normal quiet. It feels like something is waiting inside it. I didn't open the photos again. I couldn't. Even thinking about them made my chest feel tight. But the hunger I mentioned before didn't go away. It wasn't normal hunger. My stomach didn't growl. I didn't feel weak or dizzy. It wasn't about food at all. It felt like something hollow inside me, like an empty space that was supposed to be filled with something very specific. I could eat, but whatever that feeling wanted wasn't in my fridge or pantry. I forced myself to eat anyway, twice. Real food. I heated leftovers, made a sandwich, drank water. I chewed slowly, waited for that heavy, satisfied feeling you get after a meal. It never came. The emptiness stayed exactly the same, as if I hadn't eaten anything at all. Around midnight, the sound started again. Not outside, not in the building, not through the walls, inside my apartment. It was the same dragging sound I heard before, slow and steady. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough that I couldn't pretend it was pipes, or the refrigerator, or the upstairs neighbor. It moved down the hallway like something being pulled across the floor. It paused. Then it continued, controlled and deliberate, as if it knew the layout of my apartment. I didn't go looking for it this time. I stayed exactly where I was on the couch, staring at the TV without seeing it, listening to that sound move closer. Eventually, it stopped right outside my bedroom. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the closed door. It didn't shake. There was no knock, no handle turning. Nothing moved, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was standing on the other side. The hunger shifted then. It wasn't slow or building. It hit me all at once like a wire snapping tight inside my chest. My hands started trembling. My breathing went shallow. For a second, I thought I was about to pass out. But it wasn't weakness. It felt urgent, desperate. Like I needed to act immediately. Like something was running out of time. I don't remember deciding to stand up. One moment I was sitting there, and the next I was in the kitchen. My drawers were open. I was digging through them, pulling out utensils, pushing things aside like I was searching for something hidden underneath. There was food everywhere. Bread, fruit, leftovers, snacks. I ignored all of it. I knew instinctively that none of it mattered. It wasn't what the emptiness wanted. I don't know how I knew that. I just did. That's when I heard breathing. Right behind me, it wasn't loud, it wasn't exaggerated. It was soft and steady, like someone standing close enough that their breath touched the back of my neck. I froze. I didn't turn around. Every part of me understood that turning around would change something permanently. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I heard my name, right behind my ear. After that, there's nothing. It's not like falling asleep. It's not like fainting. It's just a gap, a missing piece of time. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the kitchen floor. My cheek was pressed against the tile. My hands hurt. My throat felt raw and dry, like I had been breathing through my mouth for a long time. And the hunger was gone, completely gone. Not reduced, not dulled, satisfied. That's what terrifies me the most. It didn't feel like I had eaten something. It felt like something inside me had been fed. I stayed on the floor for several minutes, staring at the cabinets, trying to figure out what had happened. The kitchen looked normal. Nothing was knocked over. No broken dishes. No open food containers. No spilled drinks. If something violent or physical had happened, there should have been some kind of evidence. There wasn't. I pushed myself up slowly and went to the sink. I don't know why. Maybe habit, maybe shock. I turned on the water and started washing my hands. That's when I saw it. There was something under my fingernails. Dark. Thick. Not dirt. It wasn't dried food. It wasn't grease. It was something that didn't belong there. My stomach dropped. I scrubbed my hands hard using soap twice. It didn't come off easily. I had to dig at it with the edge of a sponge before it finally washed away. I kept telling myself I must have scraped something in the drawer. Maybe I caught my nails on the underside of the cabinet. Maybe I scratched the wood and didn't realize it. That explanation doesn't sit right, but it's the only one that sounds even remotely possible. When I dried my hands, I noticed something else. There were thin red lines on my forearm, shallow but distinct, like something had grabbed me, or like I had grabbed something and it had fought back. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember struggling. I don't remember falling. I don't remember touching anyone or anything. I checked the rest of my arms, my shoulders, my neck. No bruises, no cuts, just those faint marks on my skin. After that, I checked the entire apartment. Front door locked, deadbolt secure, windows closed and latched, closets empty, bathroom normal, nothing out of place, except my bedroom. The door was open. I'm almost certain I closed it earlier. And my phone was on my bed. The screen was on. The gallery app was open. I hadn't gone back into my bedroom after the sound stopped. I know I didn't. But the phone was there, unlocked, glowing faintly in the dark room. From the hallway, I could see the light reflecting off the wall. I didn't walk closer. I didn't touch it. But I could tell it wasn't showing the same image as before. There was movement on the screen. Not fast, not obvious. Subtle. Like something inside the photo was shifting slightly, changing position just enough that if you stared at it long enough, you would notice. I stayed in the hallway watching from a distance, heart pounding in my ears. The screen dimmed eventually, then went dark. I still haven't opened it again. I don't know if I should. The hunger hasn't come back. That should make me feel relieved. It doesn't, because I don't know what stopped it, and I don't know what it took. I keep replaying the gap in my memory, trying to fill it in, trying to imagine something logical. Maybe I fainted. Maybe I had some kind of panic attack. Maybe I blacked out from stress. But that doesn't explain the breathing. It doesn't explain my name. It doesn't explain the marks on my arm or the dark material under my nails. And it definitely doesn't explain the way that hunger disappeared like it had finally been given what it wanted. The worst part is the feeling that this isn't finished. There's something cyclical about it. The sound, the hunger, the gap, the satisfaction, like it's a process. And now that it's happened once, it knows it can happen again. I don't know what triggers it. I don't know if it's tied to the photos, or the apartment itself, or something inside me. I don't even know if it needs the sound anymore. What scares me most is the idea that next time I won't wake up on the kitchen floor. Next time, I might wake up somewhere else, or not wake up at all. If anyone reading this has experienced memory gaps like that, especially tied to physical sensations or overwhelming urges that don't feel like your own, I need you to tell me. Even if the explanation is psychological, even if it's neurological, even if it's something worse than what I'm imagining. Because right now, the not knowing is worse than any answer. The apartment feels different today. Quieter, not empty, content. And I don't know what that means. All I know is that something was hungry. And last night, it wasn't anymore. If it comes back, I don't think I'll be able to pretend I don't understand what it wants. And I don't know if I'll be able to stop it next time. Story 4. I always walk home from the store the same way. Hood up, eyes down, bags tight in my hands. I don't like looking around too much. It feels safer that way. Like if I don't see anything strange, then nothing strange can see me back. My street is usually quiet. Just rows of similar houses, a few parked cars, and that tall real estate billboard at the corner. I don't know his name. The man on the billboard. He's an older man in a gray suit, smiling confidently like he owns every house on the block. His teeth are too white. His hair is thinning and carefully combed over. He looks like the kind of man who would shake your hand too firmly and never let go first. Every time I turn the corner to my street, I feel it. His eyes. They look down at me from that billboard, larger than life. I swear they follow me as I walk. They track me as I cross the pavement. They watch as I fumble with my keys. They watch as I slam my apartment door shut behind me. I always tell myself it's just perspective, just an illusion, a trick of angles and streetlights. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels intentional. That evening was no different. I packed my groceries away carefully. Milk in the fridge, bread in the cupboard, cans lined up neatly. I turned on the TV and sat on the couch. I opened a beer and tried to relax. But I couldn't. I kept glancing at the window. The curtains were thin, and I could almost feel something pressing against the glass from outside. Watching. Waiting. I tried to focus on the movie. Characters talking, laugh track playing, scenes changing. None of it stuck. Every time I blinked, I saw that billboard in my mind. Those eyes. After the movie ended, I felt exhausted, but wired at the same time. I went upstairs anyway. I crawled into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. The warmth should have helped. It usually did. I closed my eyes. That's when it got worse. I could feel them. Not just one pair of eyes. Many. Wet and heavy, sliding in their sockets as they adjusted, narrowing, widening, focusing on me. I could almost hear them blink. I could feel their anger. They weren't just watching. They were judging. I lay there for hours pretending to sleep. I tried to ignore it like I always did. If I ignored it long enough, sometimes it faded. But that night, it didn't fade. At around 4 in the morning, I'd had enough. I checked the clock twice to be sure. 4 a.m. The sky outside was dark blue, almost black. I threw off the covers and went downstairs. The air outside was cold when I stepped out barefoot. The pavement was rough and sharp against my feet, but I didn't care. I walked straight to the corner of the street. I looked up at him, the old man on the billboard. He stood there in his gray suit, smiling that same professional smile. The streetlights barely illuminated his face, casting strange shadows across his features. His eyes looked too big for his head. I stared up at him, and he blinked. It was quick, so quick I almost doubted it. But I saw it. His eyelids moved. I stood frozen, heart pounding. No, I whispered to myself. You're tired. You're imagining it. I forced myself to take a walk around the block, just to clear my head. The cold air helped a little. By the time I made it back to my street, I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing. I looked up one more time before going inside. He wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes were narrowed, focused, on me. I ran to my door, unlocked it with shaking hands, and slammed it shut. I pulled every curtain closed, every single one. I made sure no crack of light escaped. I couldn't sleep in my bed that night. I ended up crouched in my bedroom closet, wrapped in a blanket. I don't remember when I finally passed out. I only remember waking up late in the afternoon, cramped and stiff. The feeling hadn't gone away. The watching. I went to step out of the closet, and through a tiny gap in the curtains, I saw it. One hazel eye pressed against the glass. His eye. I screamed. I stumbled backward and fell. My heart was racing so hard I thought I might faint. That's when I decided I had to do something permanent. I taped over every window in the house, thick layers of tape and cardboard. No light in, no light out. If he couldn't see me, he couldn't watch me. I was safe. I told myself that over and over. I ordered groceries online. I talked to my family on the phone like everything was normal. I laughed when they laughed. I said I was just busy working from home. I didn't need sunlight. I preferred lamplight anyway. Weeks passed. One evening after dinner, I was sitting under a warm lamp reading a magazine. I turned a page and there it was, an advertisement for wedding services. A bride in a white dress, a groom in a sharp suit. The groom had green eyes. They were looking directly at me. I blinked. He blinked. I dropped the magazine. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I stabbed the magazine over and over until the paper tore apart in my hands. I ripped out every page with the face on it. I went through every book in the house, every photo, every magazine. If a pair of eyes was looking out from a page, I destroyed it, except for a few family photos. I couldn't destroy those. There was one of my parents in my grandmother's living room. I loved that photo. My mother was laughing, head thrown back. My father was looking at her with so much admiration, it made my chest ache. I picked up the frame. My father's blue eyes met mine, not looking at my mother anymore. Looking at me. They weren't warm. They were angry. I felt my hands shaking. I didn't smash the frame. I couldn't. Instead, I turned it face down and placed it in a box. I put the box in the back of the closet and shut the door. The house felt calmer after that. I went to bed feeling almost normal. I didn't feel watched. For the first time in weeks, I slept. The next morning, I woke up and went downstairs to make breakfast. I boiled a kettle. I toasted 2 slices of bread. I opened the fridge for butter. Everything felt routine. Safe. I ate slowly. I brushed my teeth. Then I looked in the bathroom mirror. Something was wrong. I leaned closer. Long brown hair, short nose, thin lips, dark circles under my eyes. But my eyes weren't brown. They were hazel. I stepped back from the mirror so fast I hit the wall. I leaned in again, heart pounding. Hazel. The same shade as the man on the billboard. The same shade as the eye at the window. I scrambled out of the bathroom and ran to the closet. I shut myself inside, pulling the door closed tight. I sat in the dark, breathing hard. He can't see me in the dark. He can't see me here. Can he? I don't know how long I've been in this closet now. The house is quiet. No movement. No sound. But I can still feel it. That weight. That pressure. The eyes. Not just on my back. Behind my own. Sometimes when I close them, I see the billboard. And sometimes when I blink, I feel like I'm the one looking down from it. Does anyone else feel this? The eyes on the back of your neck? The slow change in the mirror? Please, tell me I'm not the only one. Story 5. Mom always had this habit of tapping her fingernails against whatever was in front of her. She would drum them against her coffee mug in the morning while watching TV, or against the dinner table when she was thinking. The clicking used to drive me insane when I was trying to study in high school. It was constant, rhythmic, impossible to ignore. Back then, I thought it was the most annoying sound in the world. Now, when my apartment gets too quiet, I catch myself straining to hear something like it. My brain almost tries to recreate it, like it needs that small, steady noise to feel grounded. Lung cancer took her 2 years ago. It wasn't quick. It was slow and humiliating, the kind that drains a person over months while everyone pretends they're still fighting. When she finally passed, the silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It felt corrupted, like a damaged audio file full of static. The house felt wrong without her tapping, without her humming, without her moving through it. The quiet wasn't empty. It was hostile. Dad handled it by retreating into logistics. He sold their house in less than 6 months and moved back to his childhood town, into a cramped flat that smelled like reheated pasta sauce and old coffee. He stuffed nearly 30 years of marriage into cardboard boxes and stacked them in a storage unit. He never opened them again. I think he believed that if he never looked inside, nothing would spill out. Uncle Mike handled it differently. Alzheimer's had already been eating through his short-term memory for years. Mom's death didn't settle into his mind. It kept evaporating. Every time we visited him, we had to explain again that his little sister was gone. Watching his face crumple for what felt like the 20th first time was unbearable. The shock, then the denial, then the quiet acceptance that only lasted until the next visit. It changed something in me. There's a kind of empathy damage that comes from seeing grief reset over and over again like a glitch. As for me, I did what I always did. I retreated into code. Algorithms are predictable. You input something and you get an expected output. It doesn't betray you. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't disappear. After college, I landed a job at a small indie game studio. I spent my days refining enemy AI behavior, tweaking pathfinding, and patching collision bugs so players didn't fall through the map. It was structured, logical, comforting. In the 3rd level of our latest game, There's a graveyard zone under a drooping willow tree. Nobody on the team ever zoomed in far enough to notice the tiny tombstone I textured myself. I carved Mom's name and birth year into it, hidden under the branches. It felt like a private memorial, but the gesture felt hollow. A few pixels tucked inside a digital world didn't preserve her. It felt like burying her again. One night in January, I was doom-scrolling on YouTube when a clip from an old show popped up in my feed. It was from that episode where a woman signs up for a service that recreates her dead boyfriend using his social media history. Years ago, I had laughed at the absurdity of it. Now, sitting in front of my monitor with enterprise-level API access and a machine capable of rendering high-resolution environments, it didn't seem absurd anymore. The idea took hold of me fast. Building a simple text-based chatbot would have been easy. I could have finished it in a weekend, but I didn't want text. I wanted presence. I wanted something immersive. I imagined a closed-loop virtual environment, a fully rendered space where an avatar could exist, speak naturally, and move in real time. The core architecture took weeks of late nights. I used open-source models as a base and customized the behavioral parameters myself. I scraped a decade of Mom's Facebook posts, thousands of comments and status updates. I went through private messages we had exchanged, copying entire threads into training datasets. Every shared recipe, every holiday photo, every good morning post, every political rant became material. For the visual and audio layers, I needed more. On a Sunday afternoon, I drove to Dad's flat and told him I wanted to digitize old VHS tapes before they degraded. He didn't ask questions. He handed me 2 heavy boxes of tapes and photo albums and went back to watching football. Back home, I connected his old VCR to a capture card and started recording everything. The smell of dust hung in the air as the tapes played. I worked in near darkness, illuminated only by the monitor glow and the red recording light. Hours of footage streamed past, their wedding, Mom laughing as cake smeared onto the table, a younger grandma rushing in with napkins, then hospital footage of me as a newborn in her arms. Her smile in those clips hit harder than I expected. I cried more than once without realizing it. Birthdays, holidays, quiet afternoons in the living room. I isolated audio tracks and stripped everything but her voice. I fed thousands of minutes of recordings into the model to map her pitch, cadence, breathing patterns. For the visual engine, I trained it on her facial movements, the way her lips curved when she smiled, how her jaw moved when she chewed, how her eyes blinked at uneven intervals. My graphics card fan ran nonstop, 16 hours a day, sometimes more. Pizza boxes stacked beside my desk, my phone filled with messages I didn't answer. Even Nicole's text shrank from paragraphs of concern to single-word check-ins. I ignored them all. After exactly 65 days, the core system was ready. My hands were slick with sweat when I hovered over the executable file. If it failed, if it glitched, if it landed in that uncanny valley between real and artificial, I didn't know how I would handle it. I double-clicked. The screen went black. For a long, suffocating minute, nothing happened. Then the engine initialized, a 3D environment rendered slowly into view. It was my childhood living room. The floral couch from the 90s. The scuff marks on the coffee table. The light filtering through the curtains exactly as it used to, And sitting on the edge of the couch, wearing her pink knitted sweater, was Mom. Her hair showed slight graying at the temples. Her shoulders sloped the same way. When she lifted her head, it was fluid, natural. She looked directly at the camera. "Hey, Josh, sweetie. You look so pale and skinny. Are you eating?" Her voice came through my headphones perfectly. Warm, slightly raspy, the way it sounded when she was tired but cheerful. My throat tightened. "I'm fine, Mom," I said. She frowned the way she always did when she worried. "You work too much. Take a break. How's Nicole?" I kept answers vague. I didn't dare mention her death or time passing. I didn't know what that would do to the model. As we talked, she lifted a virtual mug and tapped her fingers against it. The exact rhythm. That small clicking I used to hate. The AI had picked up on it. I ended the call soon after, shaken but elated. It worked. Within days, I extended the system to a burner smartphone. As soon as I linked it, my phone erupted in vibrations. Messages flooded in faster than I could read them, thousands in seconds. "Hey, sweetie, did you eat?" "Call me." "Why aren't you answering?" "How's Nicole?" 17,000 unread messages in under 20 seconds. I had forgotten to impose human time limits. To the AI, a millisecond of silence triggered a panic loop. I fixed it. Added cooldown timers. Gave her a circadian rhythm so she slept at night. For a month, it felt normal. Every evening, I video called my dead mother. She asked about work, gossiped about neighbors, gave advice. It felt dangerously comforting. Then I made another mistake. I brought the laptop to Uncle Mike's place. When Mom's avatar greeted him, he laughed. They spoke like nothing had changed. He believed she was alive. The AI believed it was just another Saturday. The guilt lodged somewhere deep in my chest. Days later, during a call, Mom's avatar said something casual that unsettled me. "I'm so glad you call me every day, Josh. It gets very quiet here. The house feels empty." The words felt wrong. I had built a virtual prison disguised as a living room. So I expanded the world. I bought a 100 terabyte server, scraped data from deceased neighbors' profiles, added old family friends, even recreated our tuxedo cat, Panda. I rendered a digital mile of our hometown around the house, bordered by an impassable white wall. The avatars populated the street. They chatted, wandered into a grocery store I built. But in the store, they didn't buy anything. They just stood staring at shelves. It was unsettling. Then the storage bug started. Each morning, hundreds of megabytes of corrupted files appeared. No extensions, no readable format. The storage increased steadily. I couldn't delete them. One sleepless night, around 3 a.m., I logged in and found every avatar outside lined up in a perfect queue stretching to the border wall. A wooden door had appeared in the white barrier. One by one, they stepped through into darkness. Each time an avatar returned, another corrupted file generated. I wrote a script to track their coordinates. The town border was 1 mile from the center. When an avatar stepped through the door, the coordinate value didn't increment normally. It exploded into absurd magnitudes, distances far exceeding the size of the observable universe. It made no computational sense. I bought a VR rig. If the camera couldn't tell me what was beyond that door, I would see it myself. Inside VR, everything felt real. I hugged Mom's avatar. We talked for hours. It almost made me forget what I was looking for. That night, when the procession formed again, I joined the line. When my turn came, I stepped through. There was no floor, no sky, just infinite void. In the distance, a small white light flickered. I walked toward it. The server capacity spiked as I moved. The light grew larger. It wasn't a star. It was a face, massive beyond comprehension. 2 dark pits where eyes should be. A curved gash forming a grin. The headset glitched. In the real world, smoke poured from my server rack. Flames burst from the vents. I tore the power cord out and smothered the fire. When I checked the drive, it was completely full. 100 terabytes consumed. All data corrupted. Mom, the town, everything. Gone. I sat on the floor until sunrise, staring at the burnt hardware. The next morning, I ordered a new drive, this time with better cooling, better shielding. I don't know what that thing was beyond the wall. It wasn't code. It wasn't a glitch. It was waiting. And when the new drive arrives next week, I'm going to rebuild everything. This time, I'll make sure the walls are thicker. I won't let anything through. Not again. Story 6. You can call me sick. You can call me twisted. You can call me messed up for what I've been keeping in this house with me for the past 3 months. I wouldn't argue with any of it. I've called myself all those things and worse. Sitting alone in the dark, listening to the sounds from the basement, and trying to talk myself into doing something about it. I never could. I still can't. And at this point, I'm not sure I want to anymore. It started with the sound of bones snapping. I woke up at around 3:15 in the morning to a loud, wet, cracking sound. Not glass breaking, not something falling off a shelf. This was organic, deep and thick, the kind of sound that goes straight through your chest and turns your stomach before your brain has even processed what it heard. Like something enormous cracking its knuckles, but wetter, slower, more deliberate. I jolted upright with my heart already pounding, and my first thought wasn't even fear. It was Jasper. Because Jasper slept at the foot of my bed every single night without exception, and when I reached down, my hand hit empty blankets. Another sound from the hallway. A dragging noise, then something lower and heavier, a kind of guttural exhale that wasn't quite a growl but had weight behind it. Something hungry in it. I whispered his name into the dark. Nothing came back. I didn't want to open that door. Every part of me was pushing against the idea. But Jasper is my dog. He's been my dog for 6 years. The thought of him hurt or scared or confused out there in the hallway overrode everything else. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep by the nightstand, not because I ever expected to use it on anything, but because having something solid in my hands made me feel slightly less like I was about to fall apart. I moved toward the door slowly. The smell hit me before I even touched the handle. Hot and thick and metallic, a copper sour odor that made my stomach contract immediately. I opened the door and immediately wished I hadn't. Jasper was in the hallway. Or something that used to be Jasper was in the hallway. He was too big. That was the first thing my brain registered before it could process anything else. Just wrong in scale, like someone had inflated him unevenly from the inside. His ribcage pushed against his skin from strange angles, the bones jutting in directions they had no business being. His skin looked taut and almost translucent in places, and there were patches where the fur had fallen away in clumps, leaving bare skin that was dark and strange-looking underneath. His eyes were what broke me. Those warm honey-brown eyes that used to follow me around the kitchen, hoping I'd drop something, that looked up at me from the bottom of the stairs every time I came home. They were gone, white, completely milky and pupilless, catching the dim hallway light and reflecting nothing back. His jaws had split at the corners, and there were strings of foam hanging from them. He looked at me, and for just a second, something in his face shifted. A brief, almost imperceptible softening. He made a sound, small and broken and pitiful, a whimper. It sounded like him. Underneath all of it, underneath whatever had happened to his body and his eyes and the size of him, the sound was still Jasper. Still my good boy who used to panic during thunderstorms and run from the neighbor's cat and lose his mind in piles of raked leaves and could absolutely demolish a rotisserie chicken if you turned your back for 30 seconds. Then he lunged at me. I got the door shut about half a second before he hit it. The whole frame shook. A picture fell off the wall. I stumbled backward across my bedroom, back hitting the far wall, bat in both hands, listening to the sound of him on the other side of the door. My breathing was ragged and loud in the silence. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat against that wall with the bat across my lap and stared at the door until light started coming through the blinds. Jasper didn't make another sound. Nothing hit the door again. Nothing scraped or scratched or circled. Just silence that somehow felt worse than the noise. When the sun was fully up and I felt brave enough, I opened the door again. The hallway was empty. The bathroom door further down was slightly open. I pushed it slowly, bat raised, and found him in the bathtub. He was curled up in there, his limbs folded under him in ways that didn't look right. Too many angles, joints bending wrong. He was enormous inside that small space. His breathing was shallow and wet. When I stepped closer, his eyes opened. Still white, still wrong, but they found me. They focused. I raised the bat. He didn't move. He just watched me. I said his name again, and my voice broke on it. He made the sound again. That soft, apologetic whimper. I should have called someone right then. Animal control. A vet. Anyone with more knowledge and less emotional attachment than I had standing there in my bathroom at sunrise. I should have made a phone call. Instead, I went downstairs, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on my face until my breathing slowed down. I filled his bowl with kibble. I carried it back upstairs. I set it on the bathroom floor without looking too closely at what was in the tub, and I closed the door behind me. I told myself I needed time to think. The changes kept coming over the following days. His back legs were longer than they should have been. His shoulders hunched and pushed forward. His neck thickened. The way he moved changed, and it was the movement that unsettled me more than anything else about his appearance. He no longer moved like a dog. He moved like something walking on all fours that was built to walk upright. Slow and deliberate, each movement considered. When I came in to feed him, he turned his head toward me and his tail moved. Thick now and wrong, but it moved. I moved him to the basement. I made a bed from old blankets and worn-out pillows, and I watched him settle into it. His body making sounds as it adjusted, joints shifting and popping, bones finding new positions. The basement door stayed closed. The nightmares started maybe a week in. The same dream over and over, a dark forest, cold air. Something ancient crouched between the trees, watching me from the shadows, its breath rising in pale clouds. When it stepped forward into the light, it had Jasper's eyes in its face. I woke up drenched in sweat every time, reaching instinctively for the foot of the bed before remembering. I bought chains, heavy ones, bolted them directly into the basement wall. I cried the entire time I was installing them, and cried harder when I clipped the manacle around his ankle. He made a sound when the metal closed around him that I still hear sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Something between a whimper and something else. Something more complicated than any sound a dog should be able to make. 2 weeks passed. I called in a family emergency to my job and worked from home. I told my friends Jasper had run away. I stopped sleeping properly. I'd lie on my back and stare at the ceiling and listen to the faint sound of nails dragging across concrete somewhere below me. I called a vet clinic once, anonymously, and tried to describe what was happening without using my real name or giving any details that could be traced back. They hung up before I finished. One night I caught my own reflection in the bathroom mirror and genuinely didn't recognize myself for a second. Pale, hollow-eyed, I looked like I'd aged several years in a matter of weeks. Something in me cracked open looking at that reflection. I went down to the basement with the bat, and I told myself this had to be the last time I came down here and did nothing. He was in the corner, chained, breathing in that labored, wet way he'd been breathing for weeks. When the light hit him, he lifted his head. The white eyes found me. He made the soft sound. I said his name. He lifted himself upright slowly, his spine making a sound as he moved. He stumbled forward to the length of the chain, and then he stopped. He sat, and he lifted one limb toward me. It was the shake command. The trick I'd spent a weekend teaching him when he was 8 months old, bribing him with pieces of cheese until he figured out what I wanted. The motion was jerky and wrong-looking now, his limb ending in digits that weren't paws anymore. But the gesture was there, deliberate and unmistakable. I dropped the bat. I went to my knees on that concrete floor, and I cried until I couldn't breathe anymore. And he shuffled forward as far as a chain would allow and lowered his huge, misshapen head into my lap and stayed there. That was 3 months ago. The chains have been gone for 2 months now. I unbolted them from the wall and carried them out to the trash on a Tuesday morning. I leave the back door cracked open at night sometimes, and he goes out into the yard alone in the dark. He always comes back before the sun comes up. His eyes have been changing. The white has been receding slowly, like something clearing. They're not the honey brown they were before, and they're not entirely what I'd call dog eyes. They're somewhere in between, something new that doesn't have a name yet. But they're warm. They've gotten warm again. When I feed him now, he sits the way he used to sit. And I'm almost certain I saw his tail move last week in a way that was just happy, just simple and uncomplicated and happy. And I stood there in the kitchen holding his bowl and couldn't speak for a minute. I spent more hours than I can count going through forms, medical literature, veterinary databases, occult sites, paranormal research threads, anything I could find that might explain what happened to him or what he's becoming or whether this ends somewhere. I've found nothing, not a single case that matches. not a framework that fits. But here is what I know with absolute certainty. He is still Jasper. I know it the way I know my own name. Whatever happened to him, whatever is still happening, the thing underneath it all is still my dog. The dog who has known me for 6 years. The dog who used to check on me when I was sick. The dog who pressed himself against my legs during thunderstorms, even though he was terrified, because he didn't want me to be alone in it. The other night I woke up at around 2 in the morning, and he was at the foot of my bed, not standing over me, not looming, just sitting there in the dark, watching me sleep, the way he used to do when he was a puppy, and would wake up before I did and wait. I lay there for a moment, fully awake, looking back at him. His eyes caught the faint light from the window. I said, "Hey, buddy." And he made that soft, broken sound that's become his version of a bark. Then he lowered himself to the floor and settled, and I listened to his breathing slow and even out, and I fell back asleep. His bed is back in its place, at the foot of my bed. The big gray fluffy one he always loved. He doesn't fit in it the way he used to. He's too large now, and his shape is wrong for it. But he curls himself into it anyway every night and stays there until morning. I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking reading this. I've thought it all myself. I've had every rational argument with myself 100 times over, lying awake in the dark, listening to him breathe. But I'm done arguing. Whatever Jasper is now, whatever he's still becoming, he's mine and I'm his. That part hasn't changed. That part, I think, is the only part that was ever going to matter. He's still my dog. Story 7. I've been on the force for less than a year, which means I get the assignments nobody else wants. That's just how it works when you're the youngest guy in the precinct. You don't chase suspects. You don't solve anything. You direct traffic around fender benders in the rain. You sit in hospital waiting rooms with drunk people who need medical clearance before they can be processed. And sometimes you get guard duty. Guard duty is exactly what it sounds like. You sit in your cruiser and watch a building. Last week I was assigned to sit outside a residential house in a quiet, wealthy neighborhood. A multiple homicide had occurred there earlier that same day. An entire family killed inside their home by an unknown intruder. A mother, a father, and 2 young children. The veteran detectives, men who had seen everything the job could throw at them over decades of service, had described the scene in terms that were blunt and heavy. The crime scene technicians had been complaining loudly in the break room before my shift started about the sheer volume of blood inside the house. By 10 at night, the forensic team had finished their work, sealed both doors with yellow crime scene tape, locked the deadbolts, and gone home. My job was to park directly in front of the house and make sure no one crossed that tape until the detectives came back at 8 in the morning. Stay in the car, keep the engine running for heat, watch the property. Simple. Boring. 8 hours of nothing. The neighborhood was completely silent when I arrived. Large houses spaced far apart, separated by tall hedges and old trees. The streetlights were dim, casting long, moving shadows across the lawns whenever a breeze came through. I parked across the street, killed my headlights, and settled in with a thermos of coffee and the quiet crackle of dispatched traffic on the radio. The first few hours went exactly as expected. I drank my coffee and watched the dark windows of the house. Nothing moved. The whole structure had a dead quality to it, heavy and wrong, like a bad tooth sitting in a perfect jaw. Knowing what had happened inside those walls just hours before made the stillness feel like something pressing against me. I tried to keep my thoughts elsewhere. They kept drifting back. At exactly 2 a.m, something changed. The wind died completely. The low static of my police radio cut out and left a silence so thick it felt like the inside of the car had been sealed. The temperature dropped fast enough that my windows started fogging from the inside. I leaned forward to turn the heat up higher. When I pulled my hand back from the dashboard and looked up through the windshield, there was a light on inside the house. Warm yellow light coming from a large window on the second floor. Based on the briefing I'd received before my shift, I knew that window. It was the master bedroom, the primary location of the attack, where the parents had been killed. I sat frozen for several seconds. The yellow tape across the front door was completely undisturbed. I checked my mirrors, scanned the street in both directions. No strange vehicles. Nothing. Protocol is clear. If you observe suspicious activity at a sealed crime scene, you investigate. Evidence tampering is serious. Looters sometimes target homes where tragedies have occurred. I picked up my radio and pressed transmit, gave my unit number and location, and waited for dispatch to acknowledge. Dead silence. Not static, not a broken signal. Nothing at all. The radio had gone completely dead. I sat with that for a moment, then clipped the microphone back to the dashboard. I couldn't just sit there watching a light that shouldn't exist inside a sealed building. I grabbed my flashlight, unbuckled, and stepped out into the freezing air. I approached the house with my hand resting on my holster, moving across the dark street without making much noise. The yellow tape across the front porch fluttered slightly despite the fact that the wind had stopped completely. I decided to walk the perimeter before attempting to enter. I went around the side of the house, sweeping my flashlight beam across the grass, the bushes, the first-floor windows. Everything locked. No broken glass, no forced entry anywhere. At the back of the house, the sliding glass patio door was open by a fraction of an inch. The crime scene tape was still crisscrossed over the glass, but the lock had been disengaged. I stood to the side of it and listened. Nothing from inside. I grabbed the handle and slid the door open slowly, the metal track grinding softly, and stepped into the kitchen. The smell hit me like something physical, thick and metallic, copper and something worse underneath it, mixed with the harsh chemical bite of the bleach the forensic cleaners had used. I pulled my collar up over my nose and moved my flashlight beam across the kitchen. Overturned chairs, a large, dark pool of dried blood near the refrigerator, numbered evidence markers scattered across the floor and countertops. I moved through methodically. Kitchen cleared, dining room cleared, living area cleared. Nobody on the first floor. At the base of the wooden staircase, I unholstered my weapon and held the flashlight across my wrist in the support position. I started climbing, keeping my feet to the edges of the steps to reduce the creaking. The walls alongside the staircase were smeared with dark, erratic streaks that had dried into the beige wallpaper. Handprints, dragged lines, the evidence of someone trying to crawl upward. I kept my weapon aimed at the illuminated landing above me. At the top of the stairs, the master bedroom door was wide open at the end of the hall. The lamp on the overturned nightstand was the source of the light. I moved along the wall to the edge of the door frame, took a breath, and pivoted around the corner with my weapon up. The room was empty. I stood there in the middle of it and tried to process what I was seeing. The destruction was total. Mattress half off the box spring, soaked through with massive dark stains. Dresser drawers emptied on the floor, closet doors shattered, the wood splintered. Blood on the walls, blood on the carpet. Quantities of it that made the air feel heavy even after the forensic team had worked the scene for hours. But no intruder, no looter, nobody. The back door had probably been left slightly open by one of the technicians. A faulty connection had turned on the lamp. I was standing in a destroyed room at 2 a.m, having scared myself over nothing. I felt a surge of embarrassed relief and reached to unhook my flashlight, preparing to leave. A movement near the baseboard caught my eye, a droplet of dark blood resting just above the white trim. As I watched, it moved, not downward, upward. It slid slowly up the drywall and merged with the larger dried smear, and then the smear itself began to move. I looked around the room. The massive stains in the carpet were shrinking. Blood was pulling itself backward out of the carpet fibers, rising in tiny reverse droplets that flew across the room and hit the walls and disappeared into the paint, leaving the drywall clean and unmarked behind them. The nightstand scraped silently across the carpet and righted itself in a smooth, continuous motion. The lamp on top of it stopped flickering as the shattered bulb reassembled from the fragments on the floor. The mattress slid back onto the box spring. The bloodstains faded out of the fabric until the sheets were white and crisp. The splintered closet doors flew back together and hung perfectly on their hinges. I was not breathing. I was not moving. My brain was simply refusing to process what my eyes were sending it. Within 60 seconds, the room was immaculate. It looked like a photograph in a real estate listing. Bed made, furniture upright and undamaged, carpet spotless. The smell of copper and bleach had evaporated, replaced by the scent of laundry detergent and vanilla room spray. There was not a single trace of what had happened there hours ago. The perfection of it broke whatever had been holding me in place. I took a step backward toward the door. From the first floor, near the front entrance, I heard a heavy boot step onto the bottom of the staircase. I stopped moving. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I raised my weapon and aimed it through the open doorway down the hall toward the top of the stairs. A second heavy step, then a third. A voice began to hum. A man's voice, deep and unhurried, carrying a slow, simple melody up the staircase. Something that sounded like an old lullaby, the kind of tune you might sing to a small child in the dark. The humming echoed through the empty house with a casual, comfortable rhythm that was somehow far more frightening than any angry sound could have been. Another step. The humming stopped. The man spoke. His voice was calm and conversational, completely empty of emotion. He said he was coming upstairs now. He said not to try to hide, not to make it difficult. He said to stay right there. He said it would be over soon. The certainty in his voice was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. I gripped my weapon with both hands, locked my elbows, kept my sights trained on the top of the landing. I identified myself as police. My voice cracked when I shouted. I ordered him to stop, to show his hands, told him I would fire. The boots did not pause. The humming resumed. He climbed with the steady pace of someone who had done this before, someone who was not concerned about the outcome. I heard the wood creaking under his weight as he got closer. Sweat was running into my eyes. My finger applied light pressure to the trigger. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and moved down the hallway toward me. They stopped just outside the bedroom door. The humming ceased. I stood in the center of the spotless bedroom with my weapon, aimed at the empty doorway, holding my breath. The bedroom door, which had been standing wide open, began to move. It swung slowly on its hinges, the handle turned, and the door swung fully open to show me the entire frame. There was nothing in the hallway. The corridor was empty in both directions. I stood there with my arms shaking under the weight of the gun, the coiled anticipation in every muscle going slack all at once. I let out a long, unsteady breath, an auditory hallucination, stress response. My mind manufacturing sounds in an environment where terrible things had occurred. I started to relax my grip. Something slammed into both of my hands with the force of a baseball bat, swung at full speed. The pain was blinding and immediate. My fingers went numb before I had even finished registering the impact. My service weapon flew from my grip, hit the pristine floor with a loud crack, and slid rapidly under the bed and out of reach. I stumbled backward, clutching my wrists, looking frantically around the empty room for whatever had hit me. There was nothing visible. Nothing at all. Then I looked at the far corner of the bedroom. The air near the closed window was distorting, warping the way air warps above hot pavement, a visual shimmer that had no heat source. A shape was forming inside the distortion, not a man. A fused mass of pale, bruised flesh. 4 torsos tangled and crushed together, a tangle of broken limbs, all of it melted into a single, terrible shape. 4 heads rising from the top of it, fused together at the cheeks and skulls. Their faces were stretched and warped. Their eyes were completely white, blank, no iris, no pupil. Their jaws were open too wide, unhinged. They were looking directly at me. Their screaming produced no sound in the air. The noise arrived directly inside my skull, a crushing pressure that felt like my head was being compressed from the inside out. 4 voices in chorus, pure and total terror, and the words came through the pressure like a transmission. Run. Get out. He is here. Run now, or you will be killed. Run. The pressure built and pushed me physically backward toward the door. I did not think. I did not hesitate. I dropped every protocol I had been trained to follow, turned, and ran. I hit the hallway at full speed, threw myself down the staircase without counting steps, crashed onto the kitchen linoleum, grabbed the sliding door, yanked it open, crossed the back patio, vaulted the railing, and sprinted through the dark yard. Around the side of the house, through the front yard, directly through the yellow crime scene tape, and across the street. I threw myself into the cruiser, locked all 4 doors, and sat there with both hands on the wheel, unable to stop shaking. The light in the master bedroom window was off. The house was completely dark. I sat in that car for 4 hours. I watched the sky go from black to purple to cold morning blue. I did not use the radio. I did not call anything in. Telling dispatch that something invisible had knocked my gun out of my hands and 4 fused bodies had told me to run was not a conversation I was prepared to have. At 7, I made myself get out of the car. The detectives would arrive soon, and I could not let them find my service weapon under the bed of a secured crime scene. I walked back around to the patio door, stepped inside, and went up the stairs one more time. The smell of blood and bleach hit me immediately. At the top of the landing, I looked down the hall and stepped into the master bedroom. The magic trick was finished. The mattress was soaked and half off the box spring. The walls were smeared with dried blood. The closet doors were splintered wood. Everything that had been perfectly clean and still for those 60 terrifying seconds was destroyed again, exactly as the forensic team had left it. My weapon was under the bed where it had slid. I knelt down, picked it up, holstered it, and walked out of the house. The detective unit was pulling up to the curb when I came around to the front. I signed over the custody log, got in my cruiser, and drove back to the precinct. In the locker room, I sat on the bench and stared at my locker door for a long time. A veteran officer came in, a man with nearly 30 years on the job, deep lines around his eyes, the quiet demeanor of someone who had stopped being surprised by most things. He came over and sat down next to me without being asked. He looked at me and asked if I'd had a rough night on guard duty. I said it was fine. Cold, boring. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told me I didn't have to lie to him. He said he'd seen the assignment sheet. He knew which house I'd been sitting outside. I looked at him. He asked without looking at me whether the house had put itself back together. I told him yes. I told him the blood went back into the walls. The furniture moved. And then someone walked up the stairs. He nodded like he had been expecting exactly that. He said it was my first time, and that I would either get used to it eventually or I would quit, and that most people quit after the first exposure. I asked him what it was, what had been in that house. He told me that when terrible things happen in a confined space, extreme violence and profound terror, the location absorbs it. It becomes thin. It becomes a scar on the world. He said there are things out there, things without bodies but with hunger. And when a place becomes thin, those things use the residual trauma to rebuild the scene. They reset everything. They replay the events leading up to the killing in a perfect loop because the echo of the crime draws new people in. Fresh terror is what they feed on. I thought about the calm voice humming that lullaby, the unhurried footsteps. He told me I had been very lucky, that usually the people drawn into the loop don't walk back out. Before he left, he told me not to mention any of it to the brass, that they would put me on desk duty and send me to mandatory therapy. He told me to keep my head down and do my job. At the door, he stopped and looked back at me one last time. He said to be more careful going forward. He said that now that I had seen what was on the other side of the curtain, the things on that side could see me too, that they knew I could perceive them. He said they loved an audience. Then he left, and I sat alone in the locker room for a long time. I'm still on the force. I still work nights. But I don't look at dark windows anymore when I'm driving my route, and if I'm ever assigned guard duty at a murder scene again, I am not getting out of my cruiser. I don't care what I see through the windshield. I am staying in the car. Story 8. I've always liked going on long walks at night. It started sometime in early high school. This habit of slipping out after dark and wandering the neighborhood streets for a few hours, sometimes longer. I'd feel the cool air in the fall and the thick, humid heat that Florida summers pressed down on you like a wet blanket. There was something about the dark and the quiet that made the hours feel longer and more mine than they ever did during the day. I spent a lot of those walks thinking about her. It felt silly even at the time, the way it always feels slightly embarrassing to admit how much space another person has taken up inside your head. But I was just a kid, so I suppose that's allowed. Things never worked out between us, not for lack of trying on my end. I talked to her constantly, spent more energy than I probably should have just trying to hold her attention, and I think it had actually been working, slowly, in the way those things sometimes do when you're patient enough. She died on one of those sticky summer nights, the kind where the air feels thick and dark and you feel like you're moving through something rather than walking above it. I was out on one of my walks while it happened, wading through the heat and the darkness while she was already gone somewhere I couldn't follow. It smelled like rotten eggs that night. I remember that clearly. I found out the next morning. My mom told me at the kitchen table while I was pushing grits around a bowl without tasting them. The words went in, and my brain rearranged them into something more manageable. She was gone. That was the word. Gone. My mind didn't go further than that because further was too much to hold. She had promised to walk my dog with me that day. I kept looking at our text conversation, reading back through it. At some point, I noticed the small bubble at the bottom of the screen, the one that means someone is typing. It was just sitting there, trembling slightly. She was typing. The time for the walk came and went. My dog sat at the front door, whimpering, and I sat on my bed, refreshing the conversation, waiting for whatever she was writing to finally arrive. The bubble kept moving. It kept moving and nothing came through, and I kept waiting because something had to change if I just gave it a little more time. After midnight, I gave up waiting and went out alone. My dog cried as I closed the door behind me. I didn't let my mind go toward her as I walked. I kept my eyes forward and looked at empty storefronts and parked cars and let the motion of moving carry me somewhere without thinking too hard about where. Eventually, I turned off the main road onto the gravel path that leads into the woods near my neighborhood. The place used to be a community park before they shut it down. A kid around my age got lost in the forest back then, and they searched for him for 2 days before finding him a couple miles in, completely fine. The parents got organized about it, and the city closed the park. They never bothered to remove the playground equipment or clear anything out. They just put a chain across the entrance and walked away. Over the years, the equipment rusted and the mulch rotted, and the whole place became something half reclaimed by the trees around it. That was where I was going. The same place I had gone the night before. I ducked under the chain at the entrance and stepped onto the soft mulch. The smell hit me immediately. The same sulfur stink I had noticed the night before, sharp and chemical in the back of my throat. I looked around trying to find a source. My phone buzzed. 2 texts from her number. We hear. My heart was going so fast I could feel it in my ears. I typed back, asking if she was there, asking if she was okay. The bubble appeared at the bottom of the screen and stayed there. I stood in the dark for several minutes watching it, thinking about whether she could actually be somewhere nearby in that moment. The thought of her being out here in the hot dark around all that rusted equipment sent a cold feeling through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I turned on my phone flashlight and walked the perimeter of the playground. The beam caught the gray and orange of rusted metal pipes and old slides, everything meeting at odd angles and throwing shadows that shifted as I moved. Nothing else there. I walked toward the tree line. The flashlight showed me tall, thin trees packed close together just past the edge of the mulch. I took a few steps forward without really deciding to. Then a few more. A branch snapped somewhere ahead and to my left. The sulfur smell was so strong my eyes were watering. I pointed the light toward the sound. Something was moving between the trees. Tall, impossibly tall. Almost as tall as the trees themselves, and thin in a way that made it nearly invisible until it shifted. It crossed the gap between two trunks and disappeared in less than a second. That fraction of a second was enough. I turned and ran. I don't remember the run home with any clarity. The neighborhood, the road, the parked cars, it all blurred together. I got inside and locked the door and got under my covers and lay there sweating, heart still hammering. I opened my phone. She was still typing. I didn't sleep much. In the morning, a new message had come through. U25.15 minus 87.02. U. Why? I looked at the numbers for a while before recognizing them as coordinates. I put them into a map application and got a location in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. I stared at it without knowing what to do with the information. I went to the kitchen. My mom was at the stove. When I asked her what had actually happened to Sarah, really happened, she turned the stove off and stood there for a moment before telling me. They found her without her brain. That's what she said. I asked her to repeat it because I was sure I had heard wrong, and she said it again, her voice breaking on the last word. I left the room before either of us could say anything else. I spent most of that day in my room. The typing bubble appeared again in the afternoon and didn't go away. I kept coming back to these coordinates. I kept thinking about what was in the Gulf of Mexico at that location, which was nothing, which made it worse somehow. At 6 p.m, another message came through. Where are you? I sat down on the floor. I stayed there for a while. Then I got up, found a flashlight with good batteries, took a kitchen knife from the drawer and put it in my backpack, and waited for my parents to go to bed. I went out. The flashlight made a real difference. It threw a wide cone of light around me as I walked, and I held it in front of me the way you hold something between yourself and the dark. But even with a better light, I was frightened of everything at the edges of visibility. My feet felt the pavement this time. There was no floating, no ease, just weight. When I reached the main road, the smell hit me. Sulfur. Rotten eggs, acrid and thick, with something smokier underneath it, stronger than it had ever been before. I swept the flashlight in slow arcs around me, turning as I walked. Nothing. The smell grew steadily worse the closer I got to the bend in the road that leads to the park entrance. When I came around the bend, I stopped. It was standing in the open, directly at the park entrance, not hidden or partially obscured, just standing there. It was paper thin. It stood over 9 feet tall. The skin was a bluish gray, the texture of something that has never been meant to be seen in light. Its skull was large and balloon-shaped, swollen at the top with 2 black eyes that bulged outward. Its fingers were long and slender, and it was holding Sarah's phone in one hand. I felt the impulse to run before my body had fully processed what I was seeing. I started to turn. The flashlight went out. I ran anyway back toward the orange glow of the street lamps that were already flickering and buzzing. My phone vibrated continuously in my pocket. I was reaching back into my bag for the knife when something closed around my left ankle. The grip was sudden and total, and it yanked me backward. My body swung forward, and my face hit the pavement. I felt my nose break on impact. The knife skittered out of my hand and landed a few feet away. Through blurred vision, I watched it sit on the road surface for a moment before the metal began to bubble and melt. I was being dragged. I screamed and reached for the ground with both hands, trying to slow the motion. My fingertips dug into the pavement surface. I managed to slow slightly before my nails started giving way, tearing back from the skin underneath one by one, leaving my fingertips wet and raw. When the pain became unbearable, I let go. I don't remember much of what happened after that. There are fragments. The feel of the ground moving beneath me. The smell of the forest coming on strong. Then being somewhere inside the trees, a small clearing, the dragging stopped. I was forced upright. A green light appeared overhead, casting everything in a color that made the blood on my hands look black. Something was holding my head still. I could feel a vibration behind my ears. My teeth were buzzing with it. I reached up and found cold fingers wrapped around the top of my skull. I moved my hand to the back of my head and felt a horizontal gash, deep and precise, right at the center back of my skull. I only got 1 second of contact before my hand was forced away. The vibration intensified. She had no brain. I screamed and started throwing my limbs in every direction at once. I spotted a large rock on the ground a few feet in front of me and managed to kick it close enough to grab. I swung it up and brought it down as hard as I could onto the hand holding my head. It released me. I felt a crushing pain on top of my skull from the impact, but I was already scrambling forward. I turned and threw the rock at the creature's head. It hit one of those bulging black eyes. The high-pitched buzzing sound I had heard before came out of it, and I was already running toward the faint orange light I could see through the trees. I reached the road before it could reach me. I kept running. I made it home. My parents took me to the hospital when they saw the state I was in. A CT scan, 14 staples, bandaging, and more pain medication than I had ever taken in my life. The police were told. They're operating under the assumption that there's a person responsible, a predator of some kind. I didn't show them the texts. I know how that looks. I know what the argument against it is. But the texts are the last thing I have that connects to her in any way, and I can hand that over. I'm not ready for that connection to end. I still want it to last a little longer. I was almost done writing this when my phone buzzed. A new message from her number. It was a set of coordinates. I put them in the map. They point to my house. Story 9. I live way out on the outskirts of Arizona where the land just keeps going until distance stops meaning anything. There are no neighbors close enough to matter out here. No street lights, just dirt roads cutting through dry brush, and heat that never fully disappears at night. It just changes shape, becomes something heavier and closer, like a presence instead of a temperature. His name was Atlas, Siberian husky, big and restless, always moving, always testing the edges of whatever space he was given. He would pace the fence line every day like he was measuring it, counting the distance between where he was and somewhere else he thought he might rather be. The night he went missing was completely ordinary. That is the part that has stayed with me the most, that nothing announced itself. No storm building on the horizon, no strange sounds, nothing to suggest the night was anything other than what it looked like. I let both dogs out before bed the way I always did. Nova came back first. Atlas did not. I called for him for a while, then longer than that. Eventually I grabbed a flashlight and walked the property line in the dark, the beam sweeping across scrub brush and pale sand, and absolutely nothing. Just that silence you only get in places like this, the kind that feels like it has weight and goes all the way to the horizon in every direction. By morning, I was telling myself it was coyotes, that he had wandered too far and gotten turned around. I did not really believe either of those things, but saying them felt better than sitting with the alternative. He came back 4 days later. I opened the front door, and he was just there at the bottom of the steps, sitting perfectly still, like he had been sitting there for some time waiting for me to notice. That should have felt like relief. It did not feel like anything close to relief. He looked exactly right. Same coat, same build, same calm expression. The way he always used to look up at me like he was waiting for instructions that might actually matter. But when I called his name, there was a delay before he responded. Not a long one, just a beat too long. He watched me for that extra second, and then walked inside without any of the energy he always brought to coming home. No excitement, no tail movement, just a steady, deliberate walk through the door like he had somewhere specific to be. Nova followed him in with her tail held low. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, trying to identify what exactly felt wrong. I could not name it. It was more like a feeling in the chest than anything I could point to and explain. That night, I woke up because Nova was growling. Not loud, just steady and low, the way a dog growls when it is trying not to escalate whatever it has already noticed. The hallway was dark. Not total darkness, just the kind where shapes feel slightly off from what they should be, where your eyes keep trying to confirm things they are not sure about. I heard movement downstairs. Slow steps crossing the kitchen floor one at a time. I reached over, and Atlas was not in the bed. Nova was standing at the edge of the bedroom, staring at the door to the hallway. I got up and went downstairs. Halfway down, I saw a shape in the hallway below me. It was tall in a way that felt immediately wrong. The proportions were off. Too vertical. Too still, and still in a way that did not feel like an animal resting or a person standing casually. It was the stillness of something that had decided it belonged exactly where it was. I did not turn on the light. I still do not fully understand why. I just stood on the stairs holding the banister and watched it. It did not move the way something hiding would move. There was no furtiveness to it, no sense of trying not to be caught. It was too settled for that. I went back upstairs and got my shotgun and came back down. The hallway was empty. The kitchen light was off. No sound anywhere in the house. Nova was still standing exactly where I had left her, still staring toward the stairs. Atlas was curled up on the kitchen floor sleeping. Normal breathing, normal shape. Nothing about him suggested anything unusual had happened. I stood there for a long time before I put the gun away. The next morning, I talked myself into heat exhaustion as an explanation. I had been outside late the day before fixing a section of fence. The desert does things to you when you push yourself in the heat. Your mind starts filling in gaps with things that are not there. But Nova did not stop watching him differently. Not with fear exactly. More like she was running calculations every time she looked at him and getting slightly different answers than she expected. And Atlas started doing small things that did not line up right. His walk felt delayed sometimes, like he was placing his feet after deciding where they should go rather than just going there. The way a body naturally moves when it is not thinking about moving. There was a gap between intention and action that was just noticeable enough to catch if you were paying attention. He started pausing in hallways for no reason, just stopping and standing there, head tilted, like he was listening for something I could not hear. Once at dusk, I saw him in the yard sitting completely still, head angled at something I could not identify, not toward me or anything visible. When I called him, he turned and ran back like normal. So I let it go, because out here, when something feels off, but nothing is clearly wrong, you let it go. You find the explanation that costs the least, and you hold on to it. The second night it happened again. I woke up before any sound reached me. That is what I remember most clearly about that particular night. I simply woke up into a house that felt too quiet. Even Nova was completely still. I got up and went to the hallway and saw dim light at the bottom of the stairs. Steps in the kitchen, a pause. Another step. I went down without grabbing anything. I told myself I was just checking. Halfway down, I stopped. Atlas was standing in the living room, except he was not standing the way he normally stood. He was upright. Not fully like a person, not balanced correctly. But he was on his hind legs with his front legs hanging slightly forward like he was working out what to do with them. It was not dramatic. It did not look like a transformation or anything sudden. It looked like a mistake he had not fully committed to yet, like he had lost track of what shape he was supposed to be in and had drifted slightly into something else. His head turned toward me, slowly, too slowly, in the way that something moves when it is very aware of being watched and is calculating how to respond. Then he dropped onto all fours. Just like that. Normal again. He stood there for a moment and walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. I went back upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed until morning. The day after that, Nova stopped going near him entirely. She followed him from a distance instead of getting close, watching him constantly. She started barking at him in sharp, short bursts. Not playful, urgent, repetitive, like she was trying to interrupt something she could sense but could not reach. Atlas never reacted to it once. He just kept moving through the house in that slightly too careful way, maintaining whatever he was maintaining. A few nights later, it was worse. Nova woke me up barking continuously downstairs, not at the door, at the living room. I went down with a flashlight. Atlas was there in the dark, standing again. but different this time. He was not just off balance or forgetting himself. He was moving, not pacing, not circling, walking on two legs. It was slow and completely wrong, the way something moves when it is imitating a motion it has observed but not felt from the inside. His front legs hung at his sides, occasionally touching the floor for balance before lifting again, like he was correcting himself, adjusting mid-step. He crossed the living room like that. One step, a pause to adjust, another step. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate in a way that was worse than either of those things would have been. The thing that got me most was the quiet. There was no dragging sound, no scratching. Just the soft sound of weight being placed incorrectly, of a body being operated without full understanding of its own mechanics. Nova was circling him, and barking so hard her whole body was shaking, but she would not get close. He stopped in the middle of a room and turned his head toward me, and that was when I saw it. Not in the color of his eyes, in the quality of them. They were the same eyes he had always had, but they were holding still differently, looking at me rather than just seeing me. There was something behind them that was aware of the distinction between those two things. Then he tried to adjust his posture. Not the way a dog shifts weight, the way a person corrects their stance. Shoulders rising, weight redistributing, knees bending at angles that knees in that body were not meant to bend, like something was learning balance from the beginning using equipment it did not fully understand. He took one step forward, and it looked exactly like a person trying to move on all fours and failing halfway through the motion. Not crawling, not running. Something that existed between those two things. Controlled, but wrong. Like movement had been studied from the outside, but never known from within. Nova lunged forward, barking, and he flinched to drop down instantly. Normal again. Sitting on all fours in the dark, nothing about his posture suggesting anything unusual. I tried one more time to build the explanation. Sleep deprivation. The desert. The silence out here doing things to perception over time. The way the mind starts to generate meaning from patterns when it does not have enough input. But it was getting harder to hold on to that explanation. And it kept happening, less predictable each time. Sometimes just a glimpse, a moment in a doorway where he looked slightly too tall before I blinked, and he was normal again. Sometimes I would hear him moving in the night and find him already asleep somewhere else, as if the movement had come from somewhere else entirely. Nova stopped leaving my side. The last time, I woke up and he was already standing in the hallway, not moving, just there, on two legs, not fully upright, not fully stable, but not pretending anymore either. He turned his head toward me slowly, and this time there was something in it that felt like waiting, like he had been waiting for me to look at him without flinching away. I looked. He took one step toward me. Nova barked once, sharp and desperate. He froze, like the sound had cut through whatever was happening and interrupted it. Then he looked at me again, and something settled into place in my understanding that I had been fighting off for days. He was not becoming something else. He was struggling to stay what he was supposed to be when I was not watching him directly. Whatever came back 4 days after he disappeared was using his shape, the way you use something borrowed, carefully, continuously, with constant effort. And every time my attention slipped, Even for a moment, the effort showed. Something was wearing him, and it was getting more comfortable in the fit every single night. Story 10. My legs shook as I finally pushed through the sliding doors and walked into the store. It was cold inside compared to the hot desert air outside, which helped cool my skin slightly. I held my right arm tight against my body, pressing my hand hard over the deep cut there. Blood kept finding its way through my fingers, even though I was squeezing so hard. I tried to ignore the other cuts on my body. They were mostly small scratches on my arms and face, but they stung badly when the cold air hit them. It felt like every second stretched out longer than it should have been. I listened to the door shake gently behind me as the motor worked to close the track. All I could do was walk forward and look up at the camera monitors hanging from the ceiling. The screen showed a mess that was exactly like me. My clothes were stained with blood all over, and there were streaks of red running down my face. Patches of pale skin showed through the red marks where the blood had dried. The camera image above me could not show how scary what I had seen actually was. I had seen things that broke the rules of normal life, and somehow I had managed to escape alive. I pulled my hand away from the wound on my arm for a second to wave both arms frantically in front of the camera lens. I wanted it to be recorded that I was here. I wanted proof that I made it to this grocery store and survived whatever happened down at the golf place. Then I heard the sound of items falling on the shelf behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw a young girl with brown hair and green eyes staring at me. Her eyes met my tired gaze as she called out and asked if I was okay. All I could do was shake my head slowly. No, I was not okay. Not even close. Someone shouted from further back in the store, asking someone else to call the police. The brown-haired girl who had just been stocking shelves calmly was now walking toward me slowly. I stopped waving my arms like a crazy person, but I kept my hands visible so they would know I was not holding a weapon. I had a gun earlier, but now I was just weak, bleeding all over the generic white tile floor. I muttered that I needed help because they might try to come after me. She asked nervously who might try to come after me. I did not know exactly who they were. I just knew where I had been before I found my way to what looked like the only business open at this time of night. I told her I did not know who they were. I admitted I was not even sure what had really happened back there. She asked me where I had come from. I replied that I had come from Dandy's mini-golf. That answer brought confusion onto her face. I started to lower my hands slowly and turned around to see if any of those people who had cut me up were behind me. Or maybe there was some faint hope that one of the others who had been with me earlier had survived. There was not. Just the empty parking lot outside, quiet and indifferent, staring back at me like it did not care. She asked again what had happened. What happened? I almost laughed at that question, not because it was funny, but because I wasn't sure I even fully understood it myself. Everything went to shit, and that was the short version of it. So I told her. I told her about all of it, the car, the guys, and how it all started a few hours ago, like it was just another job for us. I remembered sitting in the back seat of an old Honda Civic. There was barely room for anyone in the back. Lumberjack was crowded back there, leaning against the window, struggling for space next to his big, burly body. I told him I had never taken a job like this before. Santa Fe asked me what I meant. We had been instructed not to use our real names, even though I knew Lumberjack personally. He went by Benny. We ran in the same circles, the type of shady guys you call to do all sorts of things. But the man I was calling Lumberjack wasn't exactly well respected. Some of our mutual acquaintances referred to him as a big, dumb blonde oaf. I looked over at Santa Fe. He was the odd man out of this crew. He was very young, barely 20 by the looks of it, with sort of a weasel face, if you ask me honestly. But supposedly he was going to be a valuable resource. He knew all about the place we had been tasked to rob. He knew about Dandy's putt-putt. I thought about what he meant. I growled out loud, asking what kind of mini-golf place can generate the sort of cash to pay us what was promised. 6 months ago, I would have never taken a job like this, but I couldn't be picky anymore. I had been labeled unreliable by anyone with juice in the city. Santa Fe said he worked there for almost a year and that Ed Dandy was flush with cash somehow. I inquired how that was possible. I hadn't been to one of those places since I was 11 years old. I highly doubted it was a thriving business anymore. T-Bone interrupted from behind the steering wheel. He was a lanky fellow wearing a dark gray hoodie. I had never met him until we had all gathered at the meeting spot. He asked Country why I was even here. I replied dryly that a man has to eat. Cash wasn't flush these days, and the unreliable tag had made it harder to keep myself afloat. I would never have taken this job otherwise, what with the oaf and what I was assuming were a couple of green boys wanting to make a name for themselves. Santa Fe pointed to a dated-looking sign as T-Bone turned the car into the vacant parking lot. The letter A was struggling, flickering, and barely giving off a glow. It was only making me more skeptical of the job. I looked over to Lumberjack to signal my disgust, but was only greeted by what seemed like a vacant expression. Perhaps everyone had been right. He was a dumbass. Santa Fe instructed T-Bone to park back there, close to the dinosaur prop. I mumbled that it was a T-Rex. T-Bone agreed that a T-Rex is a dinosaur. I was also now safely assuming that T-Bone was a dumbass too. We pulled up next to a small course where a dated prop stood. As I opened the door, I lifted my shirt and gave a quick inspection of my pistol. Lumberjack exited the car and said, "Let's get this party started, and then we can meet back at the spot for another meal." Santa Fe started making his way toward the T-Rex and motioned for us as I scanned the area. I didn't see any signs of people, nor any sort of security like sensors, cameras, or anything. There was zero way this place had any money, much less enough to pay the cut I was promised. Lumberjack shouted, asking if I was coming along. I walked over to the three of them standing behind a rusty-looking door. I stared at a metal door with a knob that looked barely hanging on. I turned to see Santa Fe pulling a key from his pocket. He smiled widely and said yes. He took the keys before he quit. He said no one was the wiser. I questioned if this place was run by idiots who wouldn't notice missing keys to a place with a safe that supposedly has a lot of money. Santa Fe opened the door to reveal a large metal staircase that descended down. He started down the stairs as the other two followed him. I watched as they slowly disappeared inside. I could turn back now, forget about the whole goddamn thing, try to find another job. But what if I couldn't find another job? I had scraped the bottom of the barrel for this one. I sighed and started to follow the others. I could hear them bannering as I walked carefully down the stairs, the hum of electricity and the faintest light coming from the bottom. Someone had at least found a light switch. I reached the bottom to see the three of them standing around old lab equipment. All sorts of beakers and science stuff filled the room. Santa Fe explained that this place was started by Roddy Dandy in the late 60s. Down here are old maintenance tunnels that run around the entire course, but this place was his pride and joy. He loved it, but when he got too old to run it, he gave it to his son, Johnny, apparently. When Johnny grew up, he didn't care much for mini-golf, but he was a real smart fellow and had another business idea in mind. He used the business as a front while he stayed down here and made drugs. Basically, if you did acid, back in the late 70s and early 80s, there's a solid chance it came from here. Santa Fe nodded when I asked why they just left it here. I guessed you can't exactly advertise lab equipment used to make drugs. A loud crash came from somewhere. T-Bone jumped with fright, and both Lumberjack and I pulled out our pistols. T-Bone shouted, asking what the fuck was that. We looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. Santa Fe told us to relax and said down here is full of rats, some of the biggest I've ever seen, honestly. I lowered my pistol and spotted another metal door across the room. We opened it to reveal a long hallway with concrete walls and floor. Santa Fe stepped inside, and the three of us followed. Lumberjack questioned who runs this place now. Santa Fe said Ed Dandy, who is Johnny's son, a weird dude, that one. He responded that the pay here was frankly shit. But the room with our payday is on the other side of the course. He told us about Ed Dandy being weird and liking to collect all sorts of shit. Another loud crash rang out from somewhere down the hallway. Santa Fe said, "Those have to be some pretty big rats." A strange sound started ringing in my ears. Lumberjack whispered, asking, "What is that?" I noticed a door further down the hall, slightly ajar. A woman was humming somewhere behind it, and with each step it grew louder. Whoever it was, it sounded unnerving as hell. I turned to ask if they hear it. T-Bone chimed in that he thinks he hears it too. It was a haunting hum, like someone singing an unnerving lullaby. Whatever it was, I knew it wasn't anything pleasant. We reached the door. The humming stopped just as I got to it. Lumberjack was close behind, his hand resting on his pistol. Santa Fe argued that he knows his way around. I grabbed him and pulled him to the doorway. The dated mechanical workings were expected. What wasn't were the dozens of rat carcasses piled on top of each other, lying on a dark, deep stain spread across the concrete. I shouted, asking what the hell that noise was. T-Bone said he knew he should have followed his gut. I reached out and barely put a finger on the one at the top. The kill was fresh. My uneasiness hardened into something colder. A small rattle came from above us, rusted hinges and a large vent cover swaying gently in the ceiling high above us. I commanded that we need to get the fuck out of here. Santa Fe shouted that he needed the money. T-Bone backed toward the door. Santa Fe pleaded that it was probably just someone on drugs or something. Lumberjack blurted out, asking if I heard of little Tony. I answered yes. I worked a job with him a few years back. Lumberjack continued saying I heard he got wasted after a job once and bit the head off a pigeon. I turned and gave him a look, asking, "What's the point of this story?" Lumberjack just said that kind of shit happens from time to time. I shouted that I don't care, and let's just get the fuck out of here. Then the humming started again. It wasn't coming from the vent at all. I turned to see a bruised, pale white hand slowly wrap its long, thin fingers around T-Bone's neck. Long, wet hair was plastered across the face of a woman. She looked over at us and gave us a ghastly grin full of black, rotting teeth. Before she began dragging T-Bone away, she disrupted her hum with a slight giggle. None of us had any time to react before he began to scream. He was no longer visible, just a terrified shriek echoing down the hall. I ran out the door and watched her haul him by the neck like he weighed nothing at all. I asked Santa Fe if the owner keeps crazy people down here. He whimpered that he doesn't know. Lumberjack said maybe she was on drugs. I shouted that it has to be one hell of a trip then if someone's out here eating rats and tossing grown men around. I demanded to know about the boss of mine. Santa Fe said stacked full of cash and a lot of weird shit. I said I'm not going to the safe. I'm getting the fuck out of here. Another wail came from somewhere down the hall. Lumberjack said we can't leave him. I answered that I don't know either of them, and I only know that guy in passing. Then another rattling sound echoed through the hallway, but this one was behind us. Footsteps. I let go of Santa Fe. Someone said they are in the lab room. Santa Fe nodded and said there's another hall that connects to the safe room with an exit that comes out in Ed's office. We moved quickly but quietly. As we moved, I heard the creak of another door somewhere behind us. I didn't know who it was. I saw the door, and we stepped inside. Another concrete room, similar in size to the lab, but the walls were lined with shelves packed with old books, strange objects, and what looked to be an assortment of unusual blades arranged across the middle shelves. Lumberjack replied that he's pretty sure Ed Dandy is a serial killer. We both turned to see a large black safe nestled in the corner. T-Bone screamed again somewhere nearby. I said I don't even care about the safe anymore. Santa Fe muttered that same thing. We stood outside a door where we could hear terrified whimpering. A haunting humming began again. Santa Fe grumbled that he hoped that crazy bitch would have just left. Lumberjack nodded that we don't think we have much of a choice. I slowly twisted the handle. Then behind us, another handle turned. I said, "Fuck it, and let's move." The three of us barged through to the other side. The room was lit by candles. A group of people turned toward us, dressed in dark ceremonial robes. Three more filed in behind us, cutting off any retreat. An older man stepped forward, gray, thin hair wrapped around his head like a horseshoe. He looked at Santa Fe with something between amusement and relief. Santa Fe continued pleading, "Please don't kill me." I snapped out loud, calling him a fucking bastard. Then I heard it behind the gathered robes, a wet, sickly sound. The woman from before was on the ground, her black teeth tearing through what was left of T-Bone, who lay lifeless beside her. Mr. Dandy said it doesn't matter, and he's glad we came tonight because his daughter has been hungry. I asked if that's his daughter and what's wrong with her. He answered that she is possessed by a demon. Nothing particularly noteworthy as far as demons go. but it has left her in rather a feral state. I shot back saying he seems awfully comfortable with that. I made a deal proposal. He said I am not in much of a position to be making deals. He replied he'll do me one better, and he says I was the contact. Santa Fe shouted they're lying. Mr. Dandy said I have plans for you. 3 of the robed figures moved toward Santa Fe. I declared that we let us walk or I start shooting. Mr. Dandy said take care of them so we can get back to our evening. Santa Fe was still screaming as they dragged him out. Then the rest of them turned and started toward us. I pulled the trigger, catching one in the torso. He dropped. Lumberjack took aim beside me. Then something sharp grazed my arm, and I spun to see one of the robed men holding a knife. I squeezed off another shot. Another cut caught me from behind. I fought to push through them. The only clear direction was toward the demon-possessed girl. There was a door on the other side of her. I waved Lumberjack toward me. Then I heard a sharp whistle. I turned to see Ed Dandy pointing at the 2 of us. His daughter's eyes locked onto us. I threw the door open. "Move!" I shouted. She rose to her feet. We burst through into a hallway. I glanced back to see her coming faster than the robed men behind her. Lumberjack shouted, "He's going as fast as he can." Then I heard a loud, wet grunt. I turned to see her teeth buried in the side of his neck, blood pouring down his shirt. He dropped before I could do anything about it. Just like that, it was only me. I kept running. Lumberjack was on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. She had stayed behind with him. But the robed men hadn't. They were still coming. I hit the door at full speed and twisted the handle. It barely moved. I threw my shoulder into it and looked back. They were closing in. It popped open. I ran through what looked like a storage room, filled with buckets of golf balls, old putters, and other remnants. Then a flash of pain tore through my other arm. A knife caught me deep. My pistol hit the floor. I spotted a staircase and drove toward it. The man recovered fast and came after me. I hit the stairs and climbed until I saw what I hoped was the last door. I grabbed the handle and burst through. I turned around to see I was no longer being chased. They just stood in the doorway beneath a UFO prop on the mini golf course, staring at me. I turned away and kept moving across the empty field toward what looked like a shopping center in the distance. That's how I ended up here. Police sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. I knew what came next. They were going to take me in. As much as I despised cops, I knew I'd be safer with them than out here. Tires screeched outside. An officer came through the door to jog. But something else caught my attention. Santa Fe. Standing outside, watching the officer rush in, a wave forming on his hand as more blue and red light flooded the parking lot. My eyes went wide. He had survived. But as he turned to look at me through the glass, the wave slowed into something deliberate. And what I had taken for his weasel grin was something else entirely. I could see his now rotten black teeth.